special show because we have a special guest. And the newspaper that will be coming out of this evening is volume 26, number 24, which is entitled Wounded Troops Betrayed at Home. Now, to our viewers, I want to introduce our guest. She is an educator. She is the director of the Rites of Passage Academy at PS1 Charter School, Ms. Dominique Christina. Welcome to the program, Sister Dominique. Now, we're going to jump right into our program. And it's dealing with an article that appears on page 4 of this edition of the Final Call newspaper. And the title of the article is entitled, let me just read it, Deplorable Conditions Plague Military Hospital. And it's dealing with a story that's been all over the news and on CNN and Fox and everywhere else, and of course in the Final Call. And it's talking about the deplorable conditions at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, which is the flagship hospital, if you will, of the United States military. Now, we know and understand that, you know, America is the richest country on the planet. And it's shameful that these conditions exist in America's flagship military hospital. In your view, I mean, where might the funds be to fix the problem?
The funds are in the same place they were during Hurricane Katrina, the same place they are for health care. They're in the same place that they are for after-school programs and intervention programs and different programming for Black and brown communities. They're in a war to fight terrorism by using terrorism. They're in a war to promote democracy by using tyranny. That's where they are.
Now, I mentioned to our viewers that you're an educator. Again, you're the director of the Rites of Passage Academy at PS1 Charter School. So you're a sister soldier, a woman warrior, you know, all that, the goddess Black woman. Now, one of the quotes in the paper, it talks about how the problems are systemic. And, you know, in your view, you know, being an educator, America seems to have a lot of problems with systems. What problems do you see in America's system? And I mean, you could particularly speak to education.
I mean, I think that for me the answer is a fairly simple one. It's a long conversation, but it's a simple answer because I think America's systems has problems because its foundation is legitimized by bloodshed. You can't expect to find systems that are humane, operable, decent, forward-moving when the foundation is so corrupt. So of course, all of these problems are going to show up. All of these systems would be flawed. People would die. People would be neglected because the foundation is set up for that to occur. It's set up for the benefit of few. So.
Now, I mean, in education, do you find that to be the case as well? That,
I do.
That the system is so flawed that it can't possibly succeed?
I guess what I want to say is that in terms of education, my particular feeling about it is that most of our schools across the country, public education, they are educating your children to be workers.
Right.
They're educating them not to be free thinkers.
Right.
And so the flaw in that design is an obvious one. And the children who are most susceptible to it are our children.
Right. Okay. Now, you know, in this article, it talks about the author, and by the way, it was written by Herman Muhammad, who's the White House correspondent for the Final Call newspaper. It talks about how, you know, part of the problem is that America has privatized its medical facilities, and and as a result, there's not that funding that we talked about earlier, and so you have all of these different problems. You have people coming back, and they might help to wound the physical condition or the physical affliction, if you will, of what occurred in Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever they came from. But the mental thing isn't there. And so my question to you is, why do you think that the government would privatize their hospital services where they're so vitally important?
Because privatization is profitable. That's why. Because you privatize hospitals so that your friend can get the contract and make his $150 million and then promptly leave people in a state of despair. He doesn't care. $120 million, $150 million is a lot of money. My ego is in front of my sympathy, so privatization allows to fatten the pockets of those who would then take some of those monies and put it back into campaigns for presidential candidates or congressmen. It's a very lucrative practice. That's why we privatize. We privatize prisons for the same reason. It's big business. It's a sure route to being rich. That's what it is. It's not interested at all in really righting any wrongs or healing any wounds. It's interested in making the rich richer, which is like standard for this country's practice.
Now, as an educator, because I know recruiters and people, interested in signing up young men and women for the military, they have to come around PS1 and offer those recruitment opportunities. I mean, how do you advise your students? Because I know you're an educator, but,
They come around. They have come around. I would be surprised if they returned anytime soon. My students are very present to the fact that they are currently being victimized by their government, and they have no inclination at all to fly thousands of miles away to be further victimized. And so my students use the language of, I'd rather be indicted than be drafted. So they're very clear about what the government does and the fact that so many people are expendable in this country. This article was not surprising to me. Nothing in it was surprising. And to me, when I watched the CNN take on it, and there were all of these people feeling all of this dismay about the fact that this was what the government was doing to these poor soldiers who went over there to fight. There was nothing surprising about it to me, because I had a grandfather who fought in a segregated army in World War II, whose company was led off of a bus so that the German soldiers they just captured could sit on it. So there's nothing surprising about it. Those who feel dismay are those who've somehow managed to ignore the fact that this is a historic practice of our government. It's nothing new.
Wow. Yes, ma'am. Now, last part of this is the last piece that Brother Askia Muhammad wrote about in this article. Is he talked about the emergency preparedness plan that's really been so-called in effect since September 11th, 2001. And Walter Reed Army Medical Center is I quote, an essential component of the emergency preparedness plan. My question is, if it's an essential component, why would that be so, being that the conditions are so deplorable? I mean, what does that tell us about?
That there is no emergency preparedness plan. That's what it tells you. Katrina, but you knew that.
Right.
I mean, Katrina showed you that. And in the article, doesn't it name the same company?
Right.
That did not give the people of Katrina what they needed as the company that got the contract for this hospital?
It certainly does.
Yeah, the connective tissue is obvious, I think. Yeah.
You're so right. And I mean, it just goes to show, it's just like,